Where's the Epstein files? Boo, can't find them. Don't exist.
You talk about this, I'm going to excommunicate you. Well, you're not the Pope, bro. When Trump starts behaving like that, it starts getting into cult territory.
You don't want our support now? Then fine, you don't get it. You are fat, you are a joke, you are stupid.
You now have some MAGA influencers clearly on direction of the White House saying, okay, I'm done. I refuse to be the CNN of Trump 2.0.
Now Trump has decided all of a sudden that the issue doesn't matter, it's boring, and anyone who talks about it is a weakling and not one of his supporters. He decided that in the last 2 weeks. He never said that before. So the idea that we as conservatives are obligated to just adopt that perspective out of the blue is madness.
You just watched a compilation of right-wing influencers reacting to Donald Trump's threat to excommunicate them from MAGA if they don't shut up about Jeffrey Epstein. And as you can see, they're not taking it too well. And I've got to say, I'm a little bit surprised by this. Not that I think that they're ever going to stop glazing him in the future, but to see Alex Jones with no self-awareness say, hey man, this isn't a cult. That to me is... It's humorous, but we'll wait and see how long it takes for him to go back to riding Donald Trump's nuts. Now, aside from them, there were others that were genuinely shocked by Donald Trump's response. For example, Tim Pool accused Trump of trying to nuke his own base, and Laura Loomer even thinks that it could consume his entire presidency. And in case you missed what they were responding to, it was this ginormous wall of text from Trump, where he calls his own supporters weaklings doing the Democrats' work and said that he didn't want their support. And as you could guess, it did not go over too well, but suffice to say, it's starting to really spiral out of control for Donald Trump, and it's even starting to affect the Republican Party as well, since they're also facing blowback from the base after all but one Republican voted to block the release of the Epstein files on the House Rules Committee. But it's not over, because Khanna and Thomas Massie are now circling a discharge petition, which could set up a potential floor vote on the Epstein files in the coming week, which Republicans do not want to vote on, so much so that some of them would rather skip town and avoid DC for the entire summer, because they would rather do that and hide from their constituents literally than show their cards. This is according to reporting from Politico. Quote, House Republican leaders are under fierce internal pressure to send members home for the summer amid deepening anxiety over a possible vote on the Jeffrey Epstein controversy. The hope, according to more than a dozen GOP members and aides, has been that Speaker Mike Johnson and Majority Leader Steve Scalise decide to cancel next week's scheduled House session and instead send members home for an extended summer recess once voting concludes Thursday or Friday. The thinking, the members and aides said, is that members won't have to face questions at home about whether or not they have signed on to the Massie Khanna effort, and that the issue will have died down by the time members return to Washington in September. In other words, Republicans want to skip town because they don't want to have to explain to their constituents why they voted to protect powerful pedophiles. It's actually pretty disturbing, because they're kind of broadcasting their intent to vote against this. You gotta wonder why, right? Now, I don't think that they realize that their behavior is fueling even more speculation. And it's making me wonder, is this even bigger than I expected? Because this isn't normal. Why wouldn't you want to vote to expose these pedophiles? Unless you're protecting someone or yourself or your donors. Who knows? But maybe, they're right that the base will move on after a couple of months. And I say that because data analyst Harry Anson put out a breakdown showing that even though interest in the Epstein files is at an all-time high, it's not necessarily cutting into Trump's support for one important reason. The salience compared to other issues just isn't as high.
This one surprised me a bit because of all of these complaints online going after Trump and the Epstein files. You might think his approval ratings were going down with Republicans. If anything, they're going up. Republicans who approve of Trump, look at our CNN poll. The prior one, 86%. The one out this week, 88% were Republicans. How about Quinnipiac? The prior poll, 87% approve of Republicans. This week out, 90% with Republicans. If anything, Donald Trump's approval rating has gone up since this whole Epstein saga started. He is at the apex or close there too in terms of his popularity with Republican voters, Epstein files, complaints, or not.
So Republicans care about the Epstein files, but that issue is less salient to them than other issues like immigration. And part of the problem is that there hasn't been a big enough fuss made about Trump's ties to Epstein. And if you're one of these Kool-Aid drinking Republicans and you only watch Fox News or One American News Network, you probably don't even know that there are numerous photographs of Trump with Epstein, and he has ties and a long-time friendship with Epstein. But it's also possible that they do know, and they just don't care enough to abandon him completely. I mean, it's not that surprising if that is the case, because voters already excused his criminality and the insurrection that he incited and his racism and xenophobia and his warmongering and the fact that he was found liable for rape in civil court. So ask yourself, would it be that much more surprising if they looked past his potential pedophilia as well? Not really. We are a deeply immoral country, and I don't think that Republican voters actually care about the Epstein files because they want accountability and justice. I think that they care about this because they've convinced themselves that only Democrats will be implicated, as evidenced by the fact that they always bring up Bill Clinton's ties to Epstein, but not Donald Trump's. Now, is Clinton in the Epstein files? Without question. But Trump is in there too, and I think that it's going to implicate both sides to a degree, right? But to not acknowledge the elephant in the room, which is Donald Trump, I think it just goes to show you that his supporters don't really care about the victims, and they're mad at him insofar as he is engaging in what they think is a cover-up, but not his potential criminality here. You know, maybe some of them are actually principled, but if you can't see that Trump's refusal to release the Epstein files is almost certainly because he's in them, I have to assume that you don't care about getting justice for the victims because it's right in front of your fucking faces. Nonetheless, the fact that Republicans are also feeling the heat is a good thing. But the way that they're trying to placate their base, at least the way some of them are trying to placate their base, feels so disingenuous, I have to assume that it's sabotage. Let me show you what I mean. Here's a discussion between Benny Johnson and Lauren Boebert.
So this is certainly important, and I want answers. And maybe that takes that special counsel to do so. Maybe Matt Gaetz can lead the special counsel.
Would you vote in favor of that?
Absolutely. Yes. Matt spoke highly of Pam Bondi and saying, that she's the best attorney general that President Trump has had. But yeah, Matt Gaetz as a special counsel, absolutely.
What the fuck? Speechless. Listen, I get that Lauren Boebert is a huge dumbass, perhaps the biggest dumbass in America, if not the world. But does that not feel like sabotage? Like, is she even that dumb? It's possible. But, I mean, what are you saying, Lauren? Like, it's like saying you want Sid from Toy Story to investigate missing toys or foxes to investigate missing hens. I mean, it's like she feels like she knows Matt Gaetz would be shameless enough to bury the Epstein files, which is why she'd want him to serve as special counsel, because for some reason, maybe she doesn't want the Epstein files to get out because she knows that Donald Trump would be implicated and she supports Donald Trump for other reasons, his immigration policy. I don't know, but it's also Bobo, so it could very well be stupidity. Occam's razor. But regardless of how oblivious Republicans are or pretend to be, we know that they know they're hesitant about releasing the Epstein files because, one, that would put them at odds with Donald Trump and they don't want to pick a fight with him. And two, I think that they expect to see a lot of other names on there too besides Donald Trump. But they definitely expect to see Donald Trump's. We all do. Even his former chief of staff, Mick Mulvaney, admitted that he's probably on the list in an interview with Mehdi Hasan. And this isn't surprising because Trump appeared in Epstein's black book and he also appeared on the flight logs at least 7 times. But to have a former chief of staff of Trump admit this is pretty shocking.
I imagine that Donald Trump's name is in the file someplace. There's photographs of them together. Okay. So if there's a file someplace, which I assume there is.
Trump says his name is not in anything. So he's lying.
I could imagine. Why? There'd be photographs of him.
But he said it's not him.
I have no idea. I have to imagine his name is on the list someplace. He was a member at Mar-a-Lago. By the way, Trump kicked him out of Mar-a-Lago for being too weird. True story.
I mean, he also said he's a terrific guy who likes younger women. So.
I'm actually stunned that Mehdi got him to admit that, but it speaks to his talent as a journalist. But I just love how we keep hearing that same line of defense about Donald Trump and Epstein. Well, they were friends, but he kicked him out of Mar-a-Lago for being weird or for bad behavior. I mean, that doesn't make him look any better. Epstein recruited victims that worked at Mar-a-Lago. Like, do you not think there's anything more going on there? Do you not think that Trump knew something at a minimum and didn't report it to authorities? They were best friends for years. Like, you don't just suddenly stop being friends with someone because you realize they're weird. I think you're going to realize that within the first few weeks of your friendship, assuming you even form one because they're weird. Like, you would have already determined whether or not you want to be friends with this person by the time they ended their fucking friendship. But Trump's ties to Epstein, it goes so much deeper than their friendship. They were also just in the same social circle and in a different show. Mehdi Hasan did a really great job at laying out all of this. And I totally forgot that Alex Acosta, who signed off on the sweetheart deal for Jeffrey Epstein, was Trump's labor secretary. Let's watch.
There's only two options here. One is Trump and his crew lied to these people, made fools of them, brought them to the water's edge, as you say, tried to get votes off of a child abuse scandal cynically, and then said, oh, there's nothing there is no file, even though Pam Bondi said it's sitting on my desk in February. Or there's the other scary scenario that Donald Trump, the president of the United States, is implicated in a child sex abuse scandal, which, of course, Elon Musk, his top donor, has said. He says Donald Trump's name is in the Epstein files. No less a figure than his top donor and former government ally has said that. So that's a pretty big scandal. Then you've got Alex Acosta, who was Trump's labor secretary. He's the guy who signed off on the sweetheart deal that Alan Dershowitz negotiated for Epstein in 2008. Acosta says, I was told to lay off Epstein because he's with the intelligence services. Those are the words of Alex Acosta, apparently. He wasn't told by me. So, interestingly, whether he worked for the CIA or whether he worked for Mossad, and of course he had ties to Israel. He was best friends with Ehud Barak. He lived in Israel. He invested in Israeli companies. Later. Like, he had ties to Israel. Like, I'm not saying he's in Mossad, but he definitely had ties to Israel. And the administration should come out and clarify. The administration should clarify.
So as you can see, there is so much to this story. The rabbit hole goes deep. Aside from Trump's labor secretary being the one that signed off on the sweetheart deal before he became Trump's labor secretary, by the way, Epstein might have also been an asset for Israeli and American intelligence, or just straight up might have worked for them directly. He could have had blackmail on officials. We also don't know how he made his money and why he knows so many powerful people, or whether or not they were covering for him and they knew what he was doing. Like, with each passing day, more questions come up. For example, Democratic Senator Ron Wyden just discovered that 4 banks didn't even flag more than $1 billion in suspicious activity until after Epstein was arrested, which is extremely ominous. And on Twitter, Wyden explains the Trump administration has an Epstein file detailing 4,725 wire transfers and almost $1.1 billion flowing through just one of his banks, hundreds of millions more through others. He continues, the Trump administration claims it doesn't have enough evidence to investigate. If you ask me, that's 4,725 lines of investigation right there, and that should only be the start of it. Epstein had to pay for all of his sex trafficking somehow. Further evidence shows he used Russian banks to process hundreds of millions in payments. Again, this is info in the possession of the Trump administration, but they're refusing to investigate. And by refusing to investigate, Donald Trump is basically covering up a criminal conspiracy. But again, what if one of those names in the transfers was someone that was familiar? Perhaps, him. Look, there's so many unknowns that you can't help but wonder how deep this criminal conspiracy goes and how many people it would potentially bring down, in addition to Donald Trump, of course. And the fact that Trump and Republicans are doing everything in their power to stop this from coming to light, including skipping town and threatening to excommunicate supporters, makes me assume that it is so much more worse than any of us thought. Their behavior is highly suspicious. So we absolutely should not let this go. We need facts, we need evidence, and Donald Trump is doing what he can to prevent us from getting facts and evidence. And if Republicans literally end up skipping town to avoid voting on this, we need to make sure that they will forever be branded as the party of pedophile protectors. I mean, for years, Republican politicians have fueled conspiracy theories like Pizzagate and QAnon and called all LGBTQ plus people groomers. But their behavior here is an indication that all of that might have been projection. Like they were trying to tell you that something over here was what you should investigate, when really the real thing was taking place out in the open. But their behavior here is an indication that all of that might have been projection, because every accusation is a confession after all, right? But in conclusion, I think that we should push for the release of the files harder than ever and just let the chips fall where they may. If Republicans and Republican donors are involved, prosecute them. If Democrats and Democratic Party donors are involved, prosecute them too. If billionaires and elites and international elites and academics are implicated, prosecute them too. Everyone involved should be brought to justice. And look, I'll admit that I also care about this story because it could impede Trump's agenda, and I think that we should do everything we can to at least slow down his harmful policies. But at the end of the day, I think that justice for Epstein's 1,000 plus victims matters the most here. And the first step to holding these criminal perverts accountable is transparency. So don't let up. And if you're a Trump supporter, they're hoping that you'll forget by September. They think you're stupid enough to let this go. It's on you to prove them wrong.